Amita, hi, this is Samar here from the Dell Foundation. We were just waiting for you on the Zoom. So we can't see you. Just a quick announcement for all the attendees. We will be starting the session in another minute. Sorry for the short delay here. We are just trying to get all the panelists set up. So just give us another minute and then we'll start. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the session on looking at Madhya Pradesh and its response to the COVID crisis. I will now hand over to Amitav Virmani, who's going to moderate the session for us. Amitav, over to you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, apologies. I think I had the wrong link. Welcome everyone to the 5 o'clock session, Charcha 2020. The topic of discussion today is MP as a case study, the COVID response in education. I'd like to introduce...
Sorry, Amitav, Lokesh this side, I can't hear you.
Can others hear me?
I can.
Yeah, Amitav, I can hear you, Girish.
I'll try and speak up a little bit. Lokesh ji, can you hear me now? Lokesh ji, can you hear me? Can someone else just speak and see
Lokesh,
if they can...
Can you hear me? Right now I'm speaking. Garima, can you hear me? Looks like he's not able to hear anybody.
He's not able to hear anyone. Can we just sort out his audio? Yeah, I think everyone else can hear us.
If you could get started and then we will sort out.
If we can just sort out
audio in the meantime, yeah.
That'd be great. If you can just let him know on the chat, please.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. So like I said, the topic of discussion today is MP as a case study. MP, their response to COVID in education specifically. Our three panelists are Lokesh Jatav ji, who is an IAS officer and is just recently taken over as the commissioner of the Rajya Shiksha Kendra. Garima Batra, who's a partner at the Boston Consulting Group. And Girish Ananthanarayanan, who is the chief operating officer of People, an NGO based out of Delhi, but working very closely with the MP government. Before I ask the panelists to give opening remarks, I would like to just pick up from where Rukmini Banerjee and Ashish Dhawan left off this morning in their plenary session on education, and some of the things they mentioned, which I think are key to the conversation we're going to have specifically in the case of Madhya Pradesh today. Ashish spoke about, specifically the role of parents and how the parent involvement is going to be critical in how we move forward and how we educate children. He also spoke about the, archaic and somewhat broken cascade teacher training model. which will probably have to be redefined. We're probably going to have to find hybrid solutions to how that gets delivered. Rukmini spoke about very interesting terminology, which she said this phase is dramatic, it's damaging, yet it's defining. And I think MP is going to be a wonderful example of how they have redefined themselves, or I should say how they are redefining themselves. She also spoke about this phase being one of a seesaw, where we're going to see ups and we're going to see downs. But the real challenge is going to be how to find a balance to settle somewhere in between. She spoke about, a two-way communication. Inherently, we haven't in the education system. It's been more of a one-way communication, which has been more from the teachers down to the stakeholders and not the other way back. But I think now's a time where we need to engage with all our stakeholders, especially our parents. Are we getting feedback from parents on how children are learning while they're away from school? So establishing that two-way communication channel is going to be critical. And lastly, she said, we're seeing breaking down of barriers as far as government collaborations are concerned. And again, MP is a testament to that. They've soon come to forge alliances, partner with consulting firms and not-for-profit organizations. They've pulled in a lot of resources from all over because they realize that this can't be done themselves. So, pulling in the right adequate resources and the people has been critical. So I think all of those things that Ashish and Rukmini laid out in the morning can be exemplified through the Madhya Pradesh example. And I'd like to jump into a conversation now. If I can request, were we able to get Lokesh ji back?
Not yet, I believe.
Not yet. Okay. Why don't we, till we try and get him back?
And he's just back, actually.
Is he back?
Yeah. Hi, Lokesh sir.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you now.
Lokesh ji, can you hear us now? Needs to be unmuted. So let me start with Garima till we get Lokesh ji back. If I can just request the panelists to give maybe a 2-3 minute opening remarks, and if you can also tell me where you were specifically when COVID hit. Did you need to reorganize yourself? Did you need to repurpose your organizations? Mentally, personally, where were you? And if you can just sort of share a little bit about that and give your general opening remarks, and then I will get into a series of questions with each of you. So Lokesh ji, if you can hear us, maybe we can start with you.
Hi, Amitabh, I can only hear the last sentence. We can start with you. But
okay, sorry, sir. I'll repeat myself. If I can just request you to give me your opening remarks and specifically focus on where you were, both personally and as an administration when COVID hit. And if you can just share in 2-3 minutes your opening remarks, please. Thank you.
So I have recently joined the department in Bhopal. When this COVID thing actually struck, I was in Indore. I was posted as district magistrate in Indore. And I think the first positive case in Indore, it appeared on March 23rd. And let me tell you, we had sleepless nights for 4 continuous nights. And it wasn't about me. It was all my senior officers, my field level functionaries, my doctors, nurses, everyone involved was attending such, going through such a tremendous, unprecedented. See, we have experience of elections. We have had experience of floods, earthquakes, law and order situation, but this is something which was unprecedented because it was a health hazard for many of our field level functionaries also. But over and above, I mean, the training, the kind of experience which all of us had, we could raise to the occasion and tried and ensured all things fall in place. We had little time to plan, but whatever time we got, the biggest challenge was to gather a team, because what all was planned on a piece of paper, when it actually started testing the reality on the ground, we could see there's a huge difference. Nonetheless, it was a very learning experience for us, and but fortunately for me, when my responsibility was changed and I was posted in school education department, I could gain useful insights, because previously also I worked in the school education department almost 2 years, from 2016 to 2018. So this COVID thing actually gave us a well-deserved pause, some kind of alphagram. We use the opportunity for some kind of self-reflection, like as to what all we were doing, what was the approach. And the biggest challenge and the biggest worry for us, the apprehension which we had, was the volume of learning loss. As of now, we don't have any immediate research to quantify this learning loss, but I think I can quote an example, especially a legal provision under the Right to Education Act, which makes some sense as to understand the volume of this loss. So, Right to Education RT has this provision that there should be minimum 220 number of academic days for class 6 to 8 and minimum 200 academic days for class 1 to 5 for primary classes. So, and our schools were shut down during mid-March, and the full month of April and the half month of March was gone. So we have already lost almost 35 to 40 odd academic days, which turns out to be almost 50 to 20%. And as experts are saying, if the second wave of COVID comes, then this loss will be humongous. And especially for a state like Madhya Pradesh with a predominantly rural background, with more than 2/3 of our population residing in villages, interrupted academic session will actually be more pronounced in rural areas. And especially for those who haven't had access to digital devices, the learning loss is going to be more and more acute for them. But the department took this opportunity as well as this challenge to evolve with the learning landscape. And we have come with a strategy that how we can integrate the digital learning with and how we, the biggest challenge to how to internalize it as the daily setup, as the day-to-day running of the department. So this is how we come up with the DigiLEP program, where we are using WhatsApp groups in a cascade mode to deliver study material to students. So we plan to let's make the best possible use of each and every device which is commonly present in a household, be it a radio, television, or a mobile phone. Our start has been made, beginning has been made. I mean, on the brighter side, thanks to COVID for that, for giving us this opportunity. But the greater challenge lies in how to integrate the digital learning mode, not only for students in the long run, but also for teachers.
Lokesh, thank you for that introduction, and I will come back with specific questions on your DigiLEP program and what you're doing with teacher training. And it's interesting that you say that, this caught you off guard and you've been prepared for many things like earthquakes and floods, but never expected something like this to hit you. So I can only imagine how the machinery has to redefine itself to be able to cope. So thank you for sharing that so candidly. Garima, if you could please give us your remarks.
Yes, absolutely, Amitav. Thank you. And thanks to Lokesh for setting up the pace for all of us. You asked where I was when COVID hit and if we had to repurpose and reorganize. I think quickly, just first answering that, I was actually in the comfort of my home, because thankfully my organization, even BCG, even sort of about a week, 10 days back, before the lockdown started, had announced working from home. So I was actually in my home, but I had teams in Bhopal. And I had multiple people in hotels in Bhopal, and it was quite something. Just literally a day before lockdown got announced in MP, figuring out how to ship them all out, and actually taking help from the principal secretary in Madhya Pradesh to give them letters so they could get cars and take flights and come back. So there was a little bit of that, and we have definitely also had to repurpose. I think we have been working. BCG has been working with the MP government since 2017, and while we were involved in a lot of interventions already around how to improve learning outcomes, it was a challenge for us to rise to, right? I mean, we had some plans which, some of which we could continue, many of which we could not continue in the times that arose as a result of schools shutting down, and we had to also rise up to the challenge very quickly and figure out how to support the state with the response to the crisis. And that's kind of how the whole digital learning enhancement program and behind what can we do to actually minimize the learning loss began. Moving on, I think what's still exciting for me at this time, is that we have all sort of often heard in the past that just classrooms of 2020 and the classrooms many centuries ago look exactly.
Did we lose Garima? Garima, can you hear us?
So
I think she fell off.
I think the internet and the light seems to have gone off.
Yeah, looks like it. Girish, why don't we go to you just to save time? If you can just share your opening remarks and we'll come back to Garima. Thanks.
Sure. So I guess, so just to where we were when COVID hit, I think people as an organization looks towards helping governments make their education ecosystems exemplar, which is to help a system of education move from where it is to actually being able to deliver high quality learning to the children. And we've been working across Delhi and Madhya Pradesh, and our vision is that we want to help every child reach his or her potential. We were working primarily on, so there were 4 major interventions that we look at. If we look at how do you move an education system and make it exemplar. The first is to have a visual exemplar where you can have a place where you can see the transformative results, like the exemplar schools that we have in Delhi, where we have over 85% of children who are meeting or exceeding grade level expectations, and of parent-teacher meeting attendance, which is unheard of typically within the government system. And these are real government schools with the kids that you would find in a government setup. Second is looking at teacher development and supporting teacher training and holistic teacher development. And the third is all the enabling systems around the teacher, which is the mentoring and the monitoring that happens for the teacher. How do you make that happen? So we were working on all of this, and when the COVID crisis hit, we rapidly, I was in Delhi, and we, the first week before the crisis and the lockdown was announced was when we were discussing what to do. We had shifted to work from home, and we rapidly restructured and pivoted the entire organization into 3 different task forces, looking at short-term, medium-term, long-term. The short-term one, because step 1, we have to ensure that our primary responsibility is the 1,000 kids who learn in our schools and in the schools that we run. And so we have, the first one was community support, which looked to provide, simple things like money, providing food, providing the right information about government schemes, and helping them just survive and navigate this crisis. Mm-hmm. That was just like straightforward disaster relief. The second, the medium term one, is what we call reach and teach, where we are looking at, in Delhi, we are looking at essentially a learning enhancement program, saying in this new situation, how do you actually give the children learning in such a way that they are able to actually absorb it? We've actually had, so we've been heavy on ensuring that we track impact, because this is a new space for us, and we've got encouraging results where we have done a pre-test, post-test, and seen that there is improvement in their learning in the schools that we run. And we're supporting the South Delhi Municipal Corporation do it across their 2.5 lakh children. And third is the long-term piece, because you can have response, but you also need to build the resilience of the system. And from a long-term perspective, we were looking at how do we support teacher development. Yeah, and that is what we've been working with Lokesh sir and the Madhya Pradesh government on. In the form it has been launched as CM Rise, Chief Minister Rise.
Okay. Thank you, Girish. Garima, I'm going to move on to the question. Sorry, we lost you.
I lost
but I know Lokesh ji has to leave for Indore at 5:40 sharp, so I want to try and get the maximum of his time as we can.
Okay. All right. Yes, go on.
Get you and Girish in slightly later. Lokesh ji, just coming back to what you said in terms of how you've responded. First and foremost, you said we had to rise to the occasion, and clearly you have risen to the occasion. The fact that you are designing a strategy for grades 1 to 12 across more than 1 lakh schools in your state is remarkable. You have launched a learning enhancement program, DigiLEP as you call it. You have also embarked on re-looking and redefining how teacher training will be delivered through your CM Rise initiative. And you're looking at a whole host of other things. I know the other day you were speaking at a webinar where you specifically spoke about only 25 or 30% of your children that can be reached digitally across the state, and that you still have to figure out strategies for the remainder 65 to 70% of your children that aren't digitally connected. So if I can just ask you to just shed a little bit more on what the state is doing with regard to these programs, how you've come together, what does the near term look like, but what does also the longer term look like?
Amitav, I feel like sir may have gotten dropped off again.
Okay. All right, so this is going to be an interesting.
The biggest irony is how Lokesh sir, Garima and I speak almost on a daily basis.
That's right.
The one time that we're speaking in front of an audience, like one of us keeps dropping off.
I apologize to all the participants for the technical glitch. Hopefully he'll come back on. But Garima, let me go to you then. You have been, like you said, been partnering with not only the state of Madhya Pradesh, but also several other states under the Saath initiative, through Niti Aayog. And I wanted to just understand from you specifically, if you can share a little bit more, but you also said, some of our programs had to be halted. They had to be repurposed. We had to really redefine what we do. So if you can share a little bit about Saath, and then I'll come back to Lokesh ji.
Absolutely. So let me just tell a little bit about what Saath was. First, Saath was a project that was started by Niti Aayog in 2017, and BCG and Piramal Foundation there's a consortium, and we were brought on board as PMU partners to support MP, Jharkhand, and Odisha, the three states that were part of the program, with sort of large-scale statewide reforms to improve learning outcomes. And since the last 2.5 years, we've basically been supporting the states with 10 to 12 interventions in each state, ranging from supporting mergers of subscale schools to running just large-scale statewide classroom interventions for attaining foundational literacy, numeracy skills, and remediation, to a number of system strengthening measures, which we consider core to our work, which are around just building stronger district and block level governance and accountability systems, MIS systems, building a culture of database decision-making, accountability, etc. So, I think all of that was still on, and, some things like working on MIS systems, etc., we were able to continue. But the fact that our in-class programs may not, did not actually get executed in April, fact that you can't really do verification for mergers. So some of those things had to be halted. And more importantly, we had to actually help the state sort of think through now that we're going to have schools shut down, and we have, 90 lakh students studying in sort of government schools of MP. How are we going to actually, reduce the learning loss in some ways that would happen? And therefore, the need to quickly sort of rise to the occasion and conceptualize the digital learning enhancement program, which we have also launched in the other South states and also in Rajasthan, began. And so what we started doing at that time was we actually put together a central team that, one would argue a lot of content exists already, right, which could be sent to students. But if one starts actually looking at it in detail, a lot of it is in English, a lot of it has copyrights. Then the existence of content in Hindi that was well curated, well packaged, linked to a learning outcomes framework actually did not exist. And the job we started was to actually pool our resources from across states, and quickly sort of, a lot of organizations also came forth. I think what has been heartening in this time is the amount of collaboration that has happened. We reached out to multiple organizations, and we started curating this library as BCG, which we could actually then send out on sort of WhatsApp groups on a day-to-day basis. We supported the state, actually put together nearly more than 50,000 plus WhatsApp groups that exist, which is a huge asset even for the long term, right? I think groups that connect us directly with parents, over which we send this content every day, by sort of 10 a.m. So I think that's the work that we started doing. The content is an open source library. It's available to any state. Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, for example, are states that have already started using the same content, and it's available to anybody else who uses it. So overall, I mean, it's a difficult time, but it's very heartening to just see so many states stepping up and launching various interventions. And like everyone's saying, what's important, that what has begun as a transient sort of immediate response dovetails into what can be transformational, I think, for government systems, right? I mean, the shape of the classroom doesn't have to remain what it was centuries back, and we really need to strategically think about what EdTech can and should mean in the long term for rural children, for government school children who have for a very long time sort of stayed away from it, in a very strategic way, not just giving teachers a load of content and getting them to figure out what to do with it, but really thinking how should it be integrated, how do we extend the school hours beyond school, and take that to after school time with parents and so on. So I mean, that's briefly sort of what we have started doing with all the SAT states, along with all the work that we had anyway been doing over the last 2.5 years.
Got it. Thank you. Lokesh, I was asking when you fell off, specifically on DigiLEP and CM Rise, and Garima has shared a little bit about how that is. And of course, not to get in so much of the detail, the other day you had spoken at a webinar where you were saying that only 25 to 30% of your children are digitally accessible. And even of those 25 to 30% that you have digital connectivity, the numbers that are accessing technology today for various reasons, it may not even be a priority in some of these households right now, is abysmal. And I know that this isn't top of your mind, and no one can, spin a magic wand and say, here's the answer for the 70% that are not digitally connected. But I want you to just highlight what are the challenges today you face as an administrator around getting access to children that are not digitally connected. MP is, has 52 districts, 25 of which have been affected by COVID and the remainder haven't. How are you reaching those literally in the last mile who don't even have a mobile phone in their house?
So Mitab, as I said earlier, the learning landscape is evolving. And actually, as of now, the difficult question for us is not access to school, but access to learning. Because during last 2 or 3 decades, we have opened a number of schools, especially in rural areas, keeping in mind the RTA norms for primary and middle schools. So physically, a school exists for each and every village, for each and every neighborhood. But during the COVID thing, the challenge that we are facing is even if the school is not opening, the process of learning should not stop. Mm-hmm. So this is what driving us forward to create via media to resort to other resources of learning beyond the 4 walls of classroom. So we pinned on a very simple thought, presuming that every household might have one of 4 those devices which I have mentioned, either a mobile phone or a radio or a TV and likewise. So DigiLEP is one method by which we are reaching out to students through WhatsApp group. Secondly, we have also introduced online lectures on local cable, which has quite a better presence even in interior rural areas also. Thirdly, we are also making use of radio. But let me tell you one thing. Intuitively, we don't want to push parents or teachers in an aggressively a manner that a backward demand is created in the minds of parents that since we don't own a device, my children is not able to learn. Mm-hmm. Because that is going to put a lot of financial pressure even during those times where we are getting messages from our teachers that many of the parents, they do have a phone, but just for the want of a recharge, they are not able to show the digital content which we are pushing over WhatsApp. So these type of challenges, these type of situation, especially in rural areas, and you might appreciate the kind of socioeconomic profile which our students have. I mean, for many of them to do a monthly recharge during this time or to buy a smartphone, leaving the normal keypad phone may not be a financial viable solution. Therefore, we planned it as a matter of strategy. We want to move beyond a mobile phone, and therefore we are trying to involve more and more, push more and more content through TV and radio as well.
Thank you, Lokesh. Girish, let me just bring you in quickly and I'll come back to Lokesh because I know he has to leave for Indore at 5:40. So Girish, specifically on the teacher training, like I said in my introductory remarks, that maybe the future has to, redefine how we've done the traditional cascade model of teacher training, down from your master trainers to your cluster coordinators who then cascaded down to teachers. I think here's an opportunity for us to relook at how we actually reach the last teacher who's delivering at or teaching at a school. What is it that CM Rise and what is it that you are bringing in this collaboration to CM Rise around that redesigning, rethinking of how we build capacities of the state?
Yeah. So the thing is that exactly as you said, I think it all begins with the fact that, as you said in the beginning, this is a moment where the system is changing, and there is a lot we do not know about how this will evolve. But what we do know is that no matter how the system evolves, the teacher is going to be a uh, critical, I would say almost an army that you have to depend on as a last mile to reach the student, whether it is, and their role may evolve as an educator for the parent. Their role may evolve as somebody who does distance learning for the student. But the thing is, for you to ensure that learning continues, you have to ensure that the teacher is able to grow. Now, how you do that, traditionally, like you said, has been the cascaded model. But now there is a situation where, for the near future, it may not be possible to get 100 people into a room and do training. And the traditional model of training has its own strengths and its own gaps. The question is, how do you actually use the strengths and take away the gaps as you move into this digital, or perhaps a few months later, a blended model? So what we have begun is the journey in CM Rise towards teacher development has begun with digital teacher training, where what we have done is to cherry pick specific topics that are extremely relevant for any teacher and to help them really go through a training experience that will be enjoyable for them. Like we keep saying in the team, we understand that the teacher we have to ensure that we are close to the reality of the teacher, and this has to be something that will work for them. So the last month, I mean, the CMRI's digital teacher training was launched officially on May 1. All of April was spent in like extremely long hours, just making sure that we are doing it right. And like I was telling you the other day, the hashtag, if at all, would be light but right. We have to ensure that we do not overload them with things, but ensure that what we send them will be extremely valuable to them. What we are doing is we have taken a set of courses. We have aligned with the RSK, the government curriculum team. We've aligned on, say, 70 modules that we will build out, which will all be about, say, 2 to 4 hours each. And we are using the Diksha platform, which is the MHRD's platform for teacher development, and working with them to build it out, where you ensure that each of these modules is also accessible offline, which is important. And each of them can happen in a staggered fashion, and they can consume it in bits, which is also important. And yeah.
Thanks, Girish. Garima, let me come back to you specifically about this thing that Ashish said in the morning about a two-way communication. Historically, parents have really not completed the loop because they haven't had the time, they haven't had the interest, they haven't had the inclination to be so involved in their ward and their child's education. It seems times have changed. Parents are going to have to play a more important role if children are stuck at home. And therefore, I'm very curious to know from your experience, have you been in touch with parents? Are you in touch with teachers? Are you getting feedback from them in terms of what you are proposing sitting in the four walls of Bhopal, where you have no clue what's happening in Jhabua or in a district which is absolutely shut down, what that parent or what that child or what that teacher is thinking? So I'd love to get some anecdotes or data that you have from parents that is circling back.
Absolutely. So you mentioned both parents and teachers, Amitav. I think this, very thoughtfully, we've sort of put in place mechanisms so that we can get their feedback on what we are doing, as well as understand the challenges. So, while one could get, it's overwhelming every day to get, photos and parents and positive comments, but we have to also keep our ears to the ground and understand, because there are many, many challenges that are coming out, and we know that our reach is probably, what it is. It's a very small fraction of students we're able to reach out to, and how do we expand that pie? And that's the journey that the state and we are on right now. The systems that we have are, firstly, every message that goes every day has a feedback form, and I think tens and lakhs, tens of lakhs of those forms have been filled, and over 90 to 95% parents and teachers are highly appreciative and of the content, and they're just like surprised by the fact that something has come up so quickly for their students to be able to continue their learning and for them to become a participant in the learning. So there is excitement around that, and there is a lot of positive commentary around that. On the teacher front, we're seeing so much innovation. I'm sort of talking the positives first. On the teacher side, they've started giving homeworks themselves. We get images where they get, because the teachers and students are connected on a WhatsApp group along with parents. So students are sort of clicking images and sending their homeworks back, which teachers are correcting and sending them back. They're doing mohalla classes with their green zone and so on. I mean, many loudspeakers, people are putting loudspeakers in front of the content that has been sent so that students who don't have phones can actually hear it. So a lot of grassroots innovation is sort of coming up, but I think from parents, we have sort of run a large scale call center that calls about at least 500 to 700 calls it does to parents and teachers every day. And the challenges that we're hearing is, firstly, you have to be very compassionate, like Lokesh was saying. It's a very rough time for our target segment, so understanding their challenges. And almost even today, 60-70% of parents probably still don't even understand that this program is running, or that they have been put onto a group, but they're getting something that they're not aware of, or they don't sort of understand the importance of. So there's an awareness gap. For the ones who are aware, they have challenges with respect to just data limits, being able to recharge their phones. They may have a family that has 2 or 3 children, but is only able to give the phone to one child. So there are a lot of challenges like that we are hearing from the parents. So while they're appreciative of this happening and the role that they can play, there are a lot of sort of stepwise, driving awareness, driving motivation, driving consistency to engage with the content every day, and sort of addressing their structural challenges. So some of that we're working on, and this two-way communication piece that you talked about, I think some parents have started saying some things back on those groups, but it's still not active, and we are trying to activate that channel as well. And the most important thing that we are trying to do, that I think will unlock this and will actually drive real learning through this, is getting the teacher parent student interface going. I think what the state is currently working on is to say every teacher connect with 5 to 7 students every day on the phone, speak with their parents, understand their issues, try to address their queries, try to give them some assignments, make it exciting for them. And unless that teacher-student interaction begins to happen at scale, we are getting good examples, but it's still not happening at scale, and that's what we are working on. How to make that happen at scale, how to make it reach many more students.
Great, thank you, Garima. Lokesh,
just at a short point to what all Garima has just narrated. Actually, we are able to instill, some sense of belief and some sense of change in the minds of parents. Then actually TV and mobile can be used for learning as a resource. Use of mobile or TV is not a sheer waste of time. So that trend is, gradually begin to set in, especially in the minds of parents, especially in rural areas. So this is one good change which is happening, and we would like to press hard that this initiative actually becomes a long-term integrated part of it.
Absolutely. So the one thing that I know that you're doing, which is wonderful, is that you're tracking everything that you're doing. You're trying to learn from it. And I think, COVID is going to give us 2 phases. There's going to be an intuitive phase where we just react given the crisis, not knowing what is right and what is wrong because we don't know better. And then I think there's going to be the more informed phase, which will be based on some evidence, some feedback, some learning. And obviously this will take some time, but to know that you're consciously monitoring and tracking every intervention that you are planning, that's wonderful. And not only will that benefit the state of Madhya Pradesh, but potentially the wider country. So Lokesh, I want to ask you this question, and I think this is in the mind of a lot of people in terms of when schools start reopening. I know in the state of Madhya Pradesh, you're looking at potentially phasing school opening based on whether it falls in a red zone district or an orange zone or a green zone district. Do you have some ideas of what schools might look like in the near future? I think till such time we have either arrived at a vaccine or a cure, we're going to have to maintain social distancing. We're going to have to maintain safety and hygiene standards of a completely different level. What do schools look like? And if I were to say, according to you, what does that new abnormal look like?
So at the outset, I would like to mention, we are looking for a total flexible plan. Instead of making a district or a block or a zone as a unit, we want to make school as a unit. So that depending upon the local circumstances and the area nearby, the incidence of COVID, all these things will be factored in while deciding a school should be open or not. Most importantly, I think there's a lot of apprehension as well as fear in the minds of parents right now, whether to, even if the school opens, how soon would they be comfortable in their mind to send their parents, send the children to school. So a lot of preparatory school opening work has to be done, has to be aggressively marketed, so as to say, to instill a sense of belief that school is actually a safe place to learn. And the SOP that we are making, it highlights the importance of IEC and all the health hygiene tutorials that we are trying to make, not only for the school, but keeping parents' concern in mind. Biggest challenge, the fear in the minds of the parents, and we are doing every possible step to mitigate those fears. Secondly, I think prolonged lockdown period and closure of school might affect the dropout rate adversely, and especially for the girl child, the scenario will be more worrisome and more concerning. Thirdly, apart from the government school, a lot of almost 30 to 40% of our overall schools in the state, they are private schools. An added challenge for the private schools is the means of transportation, because they need to work out the financial feasibility of running and operating a vehicle, at the same time maintaining and following the social distancing norms. So right now, every day we got frantic calls from private schools association in terms of fees, in terms of fees hike, because they have their fixed overhead expenses that they need to bear. What will be the protocol for public transportation? How the school buses will be operated? So then the staggered opening of schools, whether we will be calling some classes first, maybe board classes first, make them to sit in the school for 15-20 days, then we give them a break, some home-based projects, assignments, then they come back in the meantime. So the dynamics has actually changed, and there is a number of factors which we need to account for. So as of now, the plan is not finalized. Maybe when the lockdown 4.0 guidelines come, we would be able to come with something very complete.
And sir, before you leave, if I can just ask you, there may be other NGOs on this webinar and other government officers on this webinar. Are there one or two big lessons that you have already learned that would be worth sharing? Because I think, some states that at least I'm in touch with are still figuring out what their strategy is. They haven't got a plan in place. They're putting their committees in order, but you've already gone down a very deep road. And if there are one or two big takeaways that you might want to share, I think that would be very valuable for the audience.
So the biggest takeaway for us as an administrator is the philosophy, the thought process of ourselves has changed their manner. I have almost 16 years of experience now, and I always used to believe that change in a government setup is quite slow. It's gradual, and usually we work in a very piecemeal manner. But COVID actually tested all our intelligence, efforts, talent, what to say, and the system, as a system, we could respond to the situation. I don't know how success or failure we are, but at least we can see some changes which are very evident. When the lockdown was announced in mid-March, the first radio school program that our department launched was on April 1st, 15 days. We launched DigiLEP on April 8th. That was on the 23rd day of lockdown. So this is how soon and fast the department can respond, and this is what I mean. The opportunity COVID gave to us, that if we want to change the system, it's very much possible. Secondly, I think the way we used to communicate with our officers, with our field level functionaries, that has changed. Earlier, all our communication through this BC and online setup was limited till field level, till district level functionaries. But 2 days back only, we organized a webinar for 3 tribal districts of the state, wherein more than 3,500 teachers actually also attended the webinar. So bypassing the cascade model from state level, we are actually able to reach teachers. This is actually one very good thing that is.
Thank you, Lokesh, sir. I think I am not sure if the organizers can tell me if we're out of time or not. But Girish, till I hear on the chat from them, I just wanted to, if you could just add to what Lokesh ji said. I know you had a point to make there, but also if you can just tell me in terms of the CM Rise program and the teacher training, in terms of how are you tracking whether what you're doing is impactful or not? Like I said, it's important to close the loop. What have you done to ensure that you're closing the loop? And we've got 2 minutes to wrap up. So over to you.
Super. So we, in fact, like you were saying, I mean, we call it response and resilience. So we actually spent a lot of time even while, Lokesh sir and the government were extremely proactive in terms of supporting us in building out, deciding, launching. But at the same time, we spent a lot of time just making sure that we do track impact and ensure that we are learning as we go and improving as we go. So what we did is we did a pre-test even before we launched the first module for the first month worth of modules. We called it Alpa Viram. Today I heard from our, the person tracking the data that we have over 1 lakh responses. And this is from about 3 lakh teachers. So we were looking at a sample estimate, but we have a population estimate already. So just ensuring that you create that space for the pre-test and then later a post-test. And also at a course level, we are ensuring that we do keep assessments. Now, the important thing is that we will keep a set of people on the ground close to us to ensure that we don't lose sight of whether or not it is having real impact in terms of behavior change as well, and ensuring that we do evolve the program to suit. We would just like to add to what Lokesh sir said, which is with respect to how the schools reopen. So just yesterday, we were having a discussion saying we need to also look at how do we support the teacher to navigate this period. Number one, the children are going through an amount of emotional stress that they may not know how to express. How does the teacher learn how to help them express it and manage it? When the kids come back to school, whenever they do, like sir said, there may be their friends who are not there anymore because they've gone back to the village if they're in the city. So how does the teacher help them make sense of this corona world? And so at every step of this journey, how do you actually equip the teacher with the wherewithal and that poise to deal with these new situations is something that we are also working on.
Thanks, Girish. Garima, final question to you. What in the longer term is your point of view with regard to COVID? What's going to happen longer term to education in India? You're working in states like Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Odisha. What does it look like? I mean, from a BCG lens, how have you guys actually predicted what this is going to mean for all of us?
Well, if I may focus on, there are multiple dimensions to it. I mean, I think Girish talked about just, mental well-being, etc., becoming, important for us to figure out how to address in schools. There was also, MP has been thinking about how to think about, curricular load, right? And we will have lesser time in this year, but this is the time when we can actually potentially start shifting the vocabulary that we've been trying to shift away from syllabus completion to actually, achieving a set of real competencies for children. If we were to say, yes, we have less time, but in each grade, here's the few competencies that you need to make sure your children have achieved as they, finish this grade, and trying to shift that vocabulary right now, it's a great moment to actually try to shift that vocabulary. And from the digital lens, I mean, I think I'm very excited by just what the promise of digital could be when it's integrated with the classrooms in government in a manner that is well thought through. Now we're going to have a competency-linked, high-quality content library in Hindi for MP and for all Hindi-speaking states. Now, if we were to imagine a teacher, and we know our situation is that we have more than, in many states, more than 50% teacher vacancies, and for various reasons, and I won't get into, teachers with fairly low capacity in terms of content and pedagogy. And in that scenario, if the teacher was to start playing some of these clips that we've curated along with what she's teaching in the classroom, if she was to take 10 minutes to send some of that on the WhatsApp group with parents every single day going forward, could we figure out systematic ways of integrating what we have created, the assets we have created in terms of both content and the communication channels down to parents in an integrated way going forward? That could be revolutionary, right? And I think if we miss this moment, I mean, if states look the same as they look right now, then that would be a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take this opportunity to thank the panelists, Lokesh ji, Girish, Garima. Thank you so much. If I can request Garima and Girish to just stay back and look at the Q&A chat box and answer some of those questions which are coming our way. And thank you all the participants for being here.